Let's talk a little bit about her story, if we need time. Let's talk about the formative influences of her early life. Her mother died when she was 21 months old. Mm-hmm. She claimed to remember that.
I wonder about that, but that's just under 2.
Yeah.
It's conceivable. Or do you think people just told her, you know, when you were a tiny baby, you put your little hand on your mother's cold face?
Well, she remembers touching it. Said she remembered touching the cold face, but it obviously marked her, and that was very vivid.
I think that she probably had heard the story from the family because her grandfather was a wonderful storyteller, and that's the kind of thing that you talk about in family memories. And family stories, and they would have told what a touching moment it was, and I think she would have heard that. But I think that
she was very intense.
She was a person who had an incredible memory, and I think that...
And you look at little children just around 2 years old when they've got some language and obviously some reaction to the environment. It's conceivable that... we should talk to a psychiatrist, shouldn't we? A child psychologist?
No, you shouldn't. You should just let her tell her own story. Now, what about her father? What's the correct verb in this sentence? Her father abandoned her? Her father didn't care enough about her? Her father... I mean, he remarried. He went to Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. What do we make of that?
Well, he had to make a life for himself out there, and once he remarried, he had another family, and he had a very demanding life. And... people do talk about him abandoning her, but in point of fact, he managed to give her the sense that she was extremely important to him and that she was very, very loved. Mm-hmm. And if only 2 or 3 visits during his lifetime and a few letters accomplished this.
She says she never saw such love in anybody's eyes, and I don't think she ever did in her whole life see love like her father's love for her.
Mm-hmm. Her grandparents weren't exactly Marilla and Matthew Cuthbert.
No.
They were not, what?
No sense of humor.
No sense of humor. No warmth. No what?
By that time, no.
They were old.
They had raised a family, and who wants to start all over again after 6 of your own, you know?
Well, they were starting over when they were in their mid-50s, and, you know, they were rigid people to begin with, and
they got
worse.
Only lonely people keep diaries, she wrote. Now, what does that tell us about her? Was she lonely as a child? What do you make of her childhood generally?
Mm-hmm. She had imaginary friends, which is usually a sign of loneliness. She had a lot of friends, but I don't think she had.
She named her flowers, as Anne did, right? Yes, she had a gardenia or a carnation called Bonnie, or
geranium. This is why it's so fascinating to read the journals if you know the books. That you see the process of the creative writer taking bits of memory, shifting them just a little bit, and then placing them in the books that she's writing. But that's not the only interest in it. But for instance, I don't know if you noticed about the little red-headed boy that she hated and teased and called carrots. And that goes into her imagination and comes out with the heroine being the one that is teased.
Yeah, I have to ask you, actually, I'm not sure if this is answered in the diaries or not, or if we know it, but on the cover of the book, of this lovely book, on the photograph of Lucy Maud, the hair is red. Is that somebody's future tinting of the photograph, or was she slightly reddish? Did she have a red?
That's very true to the photograph. But
it would have been tinted. That's not color photography. That's tinted.
My impression is that she had dark brown hair. That's
she herself had dark brown hair.
Yes, it certainly wasn't red.
Perhaps it could have had a red highlight in the sun or something. I don't know.
I have this sense from the journals. She's a very happy kid. I mean, a really happy child, and things go well for her. And Cavendish is a terrific place to be a young girl. But when she's a young woman, when the woman we get to know has so many other characteristics, almost morbid, over-emotional, gets depressed, gets uptight. I mean, this is not her only characteristics, but they're all. What happened to her, Elizabeth? What is it that
there
changed her?
There certainly is a major shift around 1898, when her happy childhood seems to end. There are a number of reasons. One is the death of the first boy she was very fond of, and that comes as a terrible shock. Will.
Mm-hmm. That ended her childhood, I think.
In a sense. And then, of course, the
grandparents were getting a lot older, and I think she could see the handwriting on the wall.
She had an illness, which often does bring on depression. And maybe she, she is a motherless child, and maybe this is the stage when moving into adulthood, when that motherlessness means a very deep disruption in the personality, if I could be a little psychoanalytic.
And also through her adolescent years and teenage, what we call teenage years, she was being very, all the boys fell in love with her. She was just so vivacious that she was always having
these proposals.
And as soon as she was marriageable age, she was getting all the proposals. And I think that she treated that with a detachment all the time that she was younger. But in 1897-98, she was, 23, 24 years old, and she was suddenly realizing that life was marching on. All her girlfriends were getting married, and she was going to have to make a decision. And the grandparents were there. That was going to absorb her.
And by this time, she was very much a writer. She was writing from 16, and by the age of 20, she was just about able to support herself as a writer, which is amazing.
Is it a fair suggestion that from her idealization of the days in Cavendish and the schoolhouse in Cavendish, she would like to have remained a child forever herself?
Peter Panism.
Yeah, do you think that's a valid thought?
There's a really strong yearning to get back to childhood all the time, which partly she sublimates by writing all those children's books, thank goodness. But yes, I think she...
Well, I think that was really the period in her life when she had the greatest and the most intense happiness in the school days. Not perhaps with the grandparents, but with the friends in the community.
And what good school days they were, when you think of all you've been doing about literacy lately.
Yeah.
You think a little school in a tiny village on the north shore of Prince Edward Island, the stuff she was reading and memorizing, the beautiful way she's writing at 15, and we really think that is the way she wrote at 15.
You don't
No, we don't think she tinkered with it.
You don't. But she was, she's also
got to be writing for publication. I don't know. We're suspicious.
She's also got to be writing for publication.
Yeah.
And she's much aware, because she's copied all these things out later on. So she knows that even though she locked them up when she was keeping them, that I and a lot of other people are going to read them at some point. Right?
There's, at the end of Emily of New Moon, Emily says, I'm going to keep a diary so that it can be published when I die. She always has amused at herself, but yes, she knew she was writing a journal of very great importance.